Welcome to Refused Flank, a wargaming podcast exploring the intersection of competitive excellence and narrative storytelling potential. So we're Refused Flank, and I'm Cam.
I'm Grant.
And we're talking about where narrative and competitive playing skill meet in wargaming and board games and things like that. Right now, we're kind of talking about Warhammer Fantasy 6th edition, and this episode is going to be specifically about the Empire Armybook. We're going to go through kind of a lore overview, some of the key points that are in the book that way that might inspire your army building or inspire the way that you want to play the game. And then that'll tie into some of the units that we talk about and how that supports the lore, maybe contradicts the lore and doesn't really play like you think it might. And then, we'll just go through each of the units, talk about some of the magic items, and share our thoughts on it.
Right. So do you want to kick this one off? Empire's pretty much the universal army for fantasy, right?
Yeah, they're the regular dudes. They were in the 6th edition starter set. So, I think they're pretty iconic, especially because a lot of the setting is a little bit more Dark Ages medieval, and this is more Renaissance in a lot of ways. So aesthetically, I think they stand out from a lot of other fantasy that you would typically imagine in a medieval setting. But this is one of my armies. This is the, I suppose, first army I had, because I got the 6th ed starter set as a kid, and then it's the army that I first finally built out when we got back together, started playing again a few years ago.
Right.
But I've just always been intrigued by regular humans in fantasy and sci-fi settings that have big evil monsters and really powerful enemies in it. So for similar reasons, I'm intrigued by Imperial Guard and Warhammer 40k.
Right.
But I think that the Empire lore in fantasy, especially in 6th edition, really delivers on that feeling of the regular humans beset on all sides by impossible forces that they need to somehow defend. But I think in general, I love that there's this sense of embedded lore. It's not just presented as this dry text of, here's a wiki article about the Empire. It feels like the lore that is in this army book is coming out of the Empire, writing about itself. And so much of it is like actual documents. Like there's a letter from, who is it, Tyrion or Teclis, or who's the elf guy?
Both. They're both elf guys.
I can't remember. Anyways, at the end of the book, there's from the Great War Against Chaos, the elf lord who came and taught humans magic. He writes this letter back to his compatriots back in, I'm totally blanking.
Ulthuan?
Yeah, there we go, Ulthuan. And so that...
Teclis,
there we go, yeah. So that's sort of a thing where there's even some direct contradictions, such as how Marienburg gained its independence is described two completely different ways in this army book, not even different books. There's just one timeline says this happened and this is when it happened, and then some other chronicler says something different later in the book. And I just love that, because again, it's telling you that this is open to interpretation. You can kind of do what you want with it. You can use it as inspiration and run with it, but you don't have to take this as like, this is canon, it happened exactly this way, and you can go beat somebody over the head with it until they believe the same way. But just talking more specifically about the Empire lore, a few things that just stood out that are really interesting to me is how it describes this conglomeration of humans with a lot of different backgrounds. And if you go all the way back, it was like 12 different tribes that were united by Sigmar initially, and that then combined with the dwarfs, and so they're working with the dwarfs from very early on. This hints at the fact that there's halflings living in the moot, and so there's this whole sense that there's this assembly alliance, all these different diverse people standing against chaos. And I just think that's really cool. I think that's maybe one thing that doesn't play out as much in this army book. There's obviously the opportunities with Dogs of War and things like that. But it would be cool if some of those were built in.
It is interesting, not to cut you off, but it just getting into the history of this, because I've looked a bit at the 4th/5th ed book for Empire, and they used to have unit entries for, your halflings, for your dwarf, just, hey, they're in the army because they're allies or whatever. Yeah,
and I think they did when what was the name? Ravening Hordes, which was like the initial army book for all the lists at once, released right at the beginning of 6th ed. I think still had some of those options.
They really pared down almost every book, got kind of cleaned up.
Which seems like, again, they were trying to do that with the edition as a whole.
Right.
Which makes sense. But and obviously you could just model your unit of swordsmen as dwarfs with swords and just say that they count as swordsmen. You could do the same with your archers. Huntsmen could just be halflings with bows. But it would be cool if you actually had the rules for them, which again, you can do with the Dogs of War. But since it's described in the lore as such a core part of who the Empire is, you kind of expect it to be built in a little bit more.
The melting pot of the old world.
Yeah. I think there's so much interesting information about the origin of the Empire in this, like I alluded to, and it almost makes me want to homebrew lists for those original tribes, for Sigmar and his, I think it's like the Unbaragons or something.
Yeah.
And you can imagine basing that off of, the Marauders list or something like that, but it even describes the different what became the city-states as like, well, these people were really good with cavalry and these people were really good with bows and things like that. So you can just start seeing the army list that would be put together with this. It's like based on some of the art and the descriptions, it'd almost be like an army of Conans just fighting orcs and chaos at that stage, which would just be cool. But yeah, I just love that about the lore in these older editions, that invitation to just be a part of it, explore the different aspects that are hinted at but not really fully explained. This comes up in the hobby section too, where it specifically meant, like it shows you, here's, Talabheim's color scheme, and here's the Stirland color scheme. But then it specifically says, there's so many other minor lords, though, that have their own heraldry, and like you can paint your guys to be like his troops and do whatever you want.
Right. They give you permission in the book to be crazy. They say do whatever you want, but hey, if you want the lore, it's there for you. And 6th as a whole does that pretty good.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I like that it evokes that, but I can still make my army, my guys, my characters, and still feel like they belong in the world, that I'm not pretending to do my own thing alongside everybody else playing the real Warhammer.
Right.
I think there's some other really interesting hooks in having conflicts within the Empire. There's obviously all this stuff about the cult of Sigmar, wizards, witch hunters, all kind of being at odds with each other. And, the cult of Sigmar coming out of Sigmar founding the Empire, thinking magic is a chaos thing, it's evil.
Right.
But then eventually the humans getting taught magic by the elves, and that's what helped defeat chaos. And now the priests of Sigmar are still kind of like, I don't know about you wizards, because that seems chaosy. And obviously the witch hunters are like, I'm just going to kill you because you're casting spells.
Right.
But that all exists and coexists within the Empire. And and there's obviously hints at conflict within the cult of Sigmar, and there's the whole storyline of like Luther Huss and Vulcan that culminated in the Storm of Chaos campaign, and this idea that it's obviously pulling on a lot of the like Christian Reformation stuff, obviously even in the names, but this idea that the existing cult of Sigmar has become this overbearing, rich, corrupt thing, and then this young
Luther
battle priest is coming in and being like, we got to break this up, these guys are just getting rich and fat, and like we got to fight this. So I think that's really cool. Obviously that doesn't maybe play out in the battlefields of Warhammer, but it's obviously if you're doing like a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay campaign, so many interesting hooks there. But even if you're writing your own lore, thinking about like, well, what is my battle priest? What side of it is he on, and that sort of a thing, and how do I fit into all of this?
Is he a priest of Sigmar, or is he with Ulrich and the old gods and Middenheim and all that?
Yeah, which is also fascinating. That there's all just those little things. They're just little details that you can just take and run with if you want.
Sure.
Even just alluding to the fact that like, there's all these knightly orders. These are two main
Knights
priests
Panther versus the Reichsguard.
Yeah, and like Ulrich and Sigmar are two main temples, but you could totally have other ones. And that was something that at the time, White Dwarf would explore some of those things. I know specifically they released rules for making your own knightly orders.
Right.
And so you could even have special rules for them and things like that, which is really cool. But I think this book, like all the army, it's just ripe with lore, ripe with opportunities to make a really characterful army. And I think overall, the army book lives up to the lore that gets laid out.
I agree. And just to piggyback off that, what do you think about the look? Because to me, as somebody who looks at a lot, you're in the same boat. I think everybody who's listening is hopefully in the same boat. You look at a lot of miniatures games, you look at a lot of miniatures ranges. The Empire, even first party, but just kind of the look in the book is so unique. It's this 16th, 15th century Holy Roman Empire Landsknecht kind of, the poofy sleeves, the bright ostentatious or kind of just crazy color schemes, really bright. In your face. It's so unique because you think like, oh, it's fantasy. It's going to be more like, I guess, what you think of when you think of Bretonnian peasants. It's going to be a lot of browns, muted earth tones. But it's like, no, the armies of the Empire are like you have Talabheim, right? So it's white and red, and it's really colors, vivid. It's in your face, and I think that's really unique as a human faction. And it's really cool that they have such a unique vibe to them in just kind of the fantasy space. You don't see a lot of that taken. Like, I think of A Song of Ice and Fire and stuff.
Right.
And it's just kind of like, oh, generic swordsman guys. And I admit I'm not into the lore as much there, so maybe I'm missing some huge stuff. And you guys like, no, House Stark, they've got these swords dudes that are so different than the House whatevers. And I'm like, I don't know. But
no, I totally agree. I think it's amazing how they have two completely distinct human factions, and part of that is the aesthetic. Obviously, they play pretty differently too, have a lot of different unit options and things, but aesthetically, it doesn't just feel like, oh, well, they're going to look the same, but they'll play differently, and like, you'll take more horses and I'll take more infantry and war machines. It's like, no, Empire is the Empire, and it has a very distinct look that looks awesome on the battlefield. Yeah, I totally agree. It's unique, and I think something that even compared to other fantasy worlds and settings, you don't often see that. And I think it really upsets the general sense of like, where is the old world at compared to like our own Earth history and things like that, because Bretonnia is kind of stuck in the 12th century kind of thing, whereas the Empire is like 15th century sort of thing. They have more gunpowder, all of that. And I think that just makes it much more interesting, kind of throws a wrench in the works of our expectations of how things might play out.
For sure. Yeah, no, I just wanted to note that because I think it's such a vivid part, because sometimes people think, oh, it's the human faction. It's kind of the...
It'll just be bland, boring.
It's bland. It's going to be the generic whatever, but they're not that at all in a way, at least from a looks perspective. And honestly, I would say even gameplay, which maybe we want to start to get into.
Yeah, take it away.
So we wanted to just kind of, let's start with their kind of defining special rule, which is detachments.
Yeah.
This is, nobody has anything at all like this, but basically you'll have parent units of state troops. I won't get into all the nitty gritties because I'll assume most of you are familiar, but you'll have these parent units, and then you can bring up to 2 little small kind of sidecar units that stay within 3 inches, and they can do stuff like supporting charge into the flank, counter charge into a flank, or do
supporting fire.
And it, on the surface, I think you read this as a new player and you're like, wow, this seems amazing. This is so cool. They deploy together. This idea of, and really what Empire sells itself as, is it's the army, the individual parts might not be that strong, but the sum
the way it
of
works
the individuals is greater than, the sum is better than the individual pieces or whatever added together. They gain all this synergy. I think in practice, after playing myself with your Empire army and against the Empire army, oftentimes it doesn't always play out as well as you would expect, which I suppose is good because it's pretty powerful.
It would be very powerful if it was too easy.
If it was really easy to consistently get countercharge and negate ranks, Empire would be pretty nutty. And that's really why it's so good, is because if you can get a countercharge into a flank with I think the minimum detachment size is 5, and it's up to half of the parent unit. So if you get in the flank with, 8, halberdiers or something, and maybe two ranks 4 wide, you just negated ranks on whatever you just went in, which is
you
gigantic.
could go from winning by 1 or losing to like winning by 3.
In 8th edition or something, where it's like people are winning combats by like 12 because so many people are dying, that might not matter as much.
Right, it gets rid of static combat.
And I think some people who are maybe more familiar with 8th than I am I would hope agree with that. You don't see a lot of detachments there because they just don't matter, because you win or lose combat by 10. And
so
then
the extra that you get from breaking ranks.
And then like steadfast comes into play and all that. And here though, where we see combats, maybe not all the time, but we win or lose by 1 or 2
often,
semi-regularly. And that's just the difference there. And that's really powerful when it comes off. I think in practice, because of terrain and just the space that a bunch of detachments take up, that's a lot harder to implement, especially because the Empire aren't super fast. But I think it's a cool, flavorful rule. Supporting fire at times is really interesting and gives you an easy way to bring in shooting units when you don't want to bring them maybe 10 wide or whatever.
That's the biggest part, I think.
So there's a lot of cool stuff. I guess, do you have any thoughts? You've played more games with Empire than I have.
Yeah.
But I've played against them a lot, I guess.
Yeah. I have a lot of things to say about the quality of the troops throughout this army book, and the fact that they get wrecked by a lot of other armies in a lot of other ways.
Right.
But I think this is the rule that helps bring them on par. And I think the way that it's pitched, like you described in the book itself, in the intro and in the detachment rules, kind of explaining that this is how it brings it together, I think is what makes it all make sense that the humans are able to survive in this world, is because of this is like their ingenuity thing, where it's like, we know how to work together with it. We're not just going to charge across the field like the orcs. We're not just going to be mega powerful magic dudes like the chaos. We actually have to think hard about how we're going to use inter-unit tactics to pull this together. And so I think lore-wise, this is amazing, because it really helps elevate what would otherwise just be annihilated by chaos immediately into something that feels like, oh, this could actually stand in this world of monsters and magic.
For sure.
But totally agree that it's really hard to do. I think they're upfront about that at the beginning of the book. They say Empire is not an easy army to play.
I think it's a somebody who really wants to take the Empire and that's their main force, you know, and you want to learn it. And be like, okay, and really learn your deployment and really learn your matchups and be like, okay, I've got to stall that thing over there because I can't deal with it. Oh, those are Chaos Chosen Knights. I have nothing I can deal with, so I'm going to throw Flagellants at it or whatever. But over here, okay, the Chaos Warriors or whatever, maybe I can win with a flank charge and trying to set that up. And
to that end, I would say that it's a very rewarding army to play if you want that much work. I mean, you recently sent me that document that you had found that was like a primer on how to play Empire and use the detachments well. And that's amazing. That makes me really excited. And every player might not be excited about having to read an additional 40-page document to feel like they can even come to the table and have a chance.
Do you think it's a beginner's army? Because I think people look at it on the outset and they're like, oh, it's the, maybe regular not the Space Marines, but it's the Guard.
The fact that it's so iconic that it's in the starter set, I think makes people think that. I think it is absolutely not a starter army. I would never recommend it to a new player as their first army.
I agree.
I almost wish it wasn't my first army, but I think I learned a lot from it being my first army.
I actually think and we'll get to that later, I think I played the best starter army, generally speaking, and we'll get into that later. I guess I'll just say it. I think Lizardmen are probably the best starter army if you're trying to get into 6th. But we'll get into that later. But
I've got a couple more things to say about detachments quick. I think, like you said, the slow moving is tough. Often I feel like I'm just getting charged by an entire battle line at once, and so there's no ability to do counter charges because the detachments are just also getting charged. Maybe part of that is due to just how many games I've played against Bretonnia and Minotaurs, and so they're just always wildly out charging.
In our group.
So it's just really hard to keep the detachments back far enough. I think one thing that would alleviate that would make it easier is if parent units could also countercharge in support of their detachments, and not being able to do that sucks because it feels like, of course, you're going to just charge the detachment if you can.
If you have the option.
And so that just makes it even harder to try to position it to pull this off. But like you said, that might make it too easy and too powerful to do, so I wouldn't be wanting to necessarily implement that yet without getting a little bit better at it myself and really feeling like I've pushed this to its limit and it still isn't working.
I think the problem is because it's so powerful when it does happen, if you're able to kind of thread that needle and put somebody in a situation where they are, you can do, because of the detachments rule, you can put somebody theoretically, like let's say it's Chaos and there's movement 4-2, right? You can be like, you either charge me here and you get countercharged, or if you don't, I'm going to charge you on my turn and get the supporting charge. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. How do I approach this? And there are like those theoretical situations where it's just like, oh crap, like I walked into the trap. And I think what Empire getting good at it or whatever in beyond just the lore, it's like finding ways. You're almost like a control player in Magic if people play that. It's like you're trying to coerce the other opponent into bad matchups.
Right,
and you're trying
to bad decisions.
Right, into bad decisions. And I think as a combined arms force with a pretty balanced list, you can do that once you get a little bit of experience and identify what the problem units are.
And I think that's key because, again, one of my main issues succeeding with this is that there's often a solid battle line, so there's just no ability for my countercharge to even happen on the charge or the receiving the charge. So I think if you can't play to where you can be march blocking a unit to make it fall out of line in the battle line, or you can disrupt something, make a panic check with some shooting or magic, that's where I think you're right. Like if you're not thinking fully about how is all of my army working together to help pull this core tactic off with my detachments, then it's just not going to happen by chance. So I think it's tough. But one thing, you mentioned the shooting, I think that's low-key one of the best aspects of detachments because it's just so hard to take units of 10 handgunners.
They're so wide.
Because if you can't guarantee you have a hill, you're only going to be able to shoot with 5 of them at a time. unless you really want to take up that much of your front line. But you usually have so many troops in an Empire army, there's just not space to do a 10 wide unit. So just being able to take units of 5 handgunners at a time is awesome. I almost want to try, I haven't done this yet, but take all my detachments as handgunners of units of 6 maybe, and then do the thing where I just line them up completely in front. They'll receive the charge, shoot, they'll get wiped out, but they don't cause panic.
Right.
And so then I'll just take the charge at that point, and hopefully I've just done enough damage that I've broken a rank or something like that. But I think that could be like maybe the easier way to play detachments is just lean into the fact that you can take
supporting fire. Yeah,
because having, again, like, if you have 3 units of state troops, you could have 6 units of 6 handgunners. So
36 shots a turn.
Yeah, that could be huge. So I would love to try that at some point.
I dig it. Okay, I want to see that. I want to get shot to death.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are my thoughts on detachments. But
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's move into specific unit overviews, and we'll just kind of go down the book. So if you guys have it, you can follow along. So we're starting in Lord choices with the Elector count. He is, for me, pretty awesome. He's cheap at 80 points, but he's pretty much the weakest combat lord in the game. He's a hero in a lord slot from a combat perspective because he's got 3 attacks, which I think a lot of people skip over. They focus on weapon skill, or at least that's what I've noticed. He's weapon skill 5. He's pretty much the captain, but for 30 more points. He does have better leadership, which is a big deal in this army.
Huge for Empire. That's like the main reason to take him.
Yeah, he does have some options that the captain doesn't have, namely the Griffin. We can talk about that a little bit, but he also gives you kind of this this substantial, but you might ignore at first glance. He gives somebody a magic banner who can't have it otherwise, which is huge.
You don't have to have a captain slot taken up to get that nice magic banner in your state troops.
For sure. So really, if you're taking the count, you're taking him for leadership, and maybe you want to kit him out to fight. You can. Empire is cool because they have access to plate armor on a lot of their characters, so you can get really good armor saves for pretty darn cheap.
Yeah,
Empire,
but if you go into a challenge against a Chaos Lord, it doesn't matter that you have plate armor and roofing, you're still going to get killed, probably.
Right, most likely. but in the way that you got to look at it is that you can invest comparatively little and get a fairly survivable character.
Yeah.
And you're still, I mean, you're not going to, I guess, absolutely decimate rank and flank troops, but you're going to, you'll beat them. You can get into a challenge with a champion and you're going to win pretty comfortably if some mook's targeting you.
Yeah.
Your weapon skill 5, they're probably hitting you on 4s, and you're going to have like a 2-up.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And that's exactly what I would say is the main benefit for Empire captains and Elector counts is their cheap price. And that's what I think they are well priced in that like you look at those stats and you're like, oh, they're going to get wrecked. But then you look at the price and you're like, oh, but if it's only 90 points, that's honestly not that bad.
Right. Yeah. And then going away from the rules so much too, just looking at the narrative aspect, just by including one in your force, you're kind of telling a story because there's a limited number of these guys. And just so you could pick one of the named ones or whatever, but you could just say, oh no, that guy died. This is his great-grandson or whatever. You could do whatever you want.
Pick any point in the timeline.
And then whatever unit he's with. Is that his bodyguard? Is that his, whatever. And I think
what's going on that means he had to show up to the battle.
Yeah, why didn't he send just some of the captains or whatever? So I think just him being there creates a narrative around him or whatever. And maybe you did a slow grow campaign, which we really like doing. And it's like, because he's a Lord choice, he doesn't show up until 2,000 points. So it's like we built up to this guy arriving, and then maybe he shows up, and it's like, okay, he's not the craziest combat lord, but he's leadership 9.
Yeah, and that's going to mean something for my Empire troops holding. Yeah,
for sure. So, and then I just wanted to touch on briefly the Griffin. We've played a game with the Griffin. He wasn't great, although that was pretty early on to our fantasy career. I would like to try him again.
Yeah, well, here's my thoughts on the Griffin.
Go for it.
The Griffin is awesome.
Yes.
But you have to keep the Empire General within 12 inches of all of your units for his leadership 9. That's the reason you take him. And so putting him on a Griffin, to get the benefit of a Griffin with the fly special rule, you need to fly out of that range. And so I think that's what happened to me is I was kind of keeping him in the back line to keep his leadership buff, but that meant I just never actually flew behind your lines to, outflank or things like that.
March block, terror, bubble.
So I think taking the Griffin just puts you in a bind because you're picking between 2 things, and one of them is arguably more important because it affects the entire rest of your army. So I think I would definitely take one at 3,000 points where I can have 2 lords
I think that's going to be something you'll hear us say as we go through the books. A lot of these monstrous mounts are a thing where it's like, if you got a secondary lord, awesome.
Yeah, because then another Elector count can be your general, or the Grand Templar can be your general. They can stick around near the battle line, and then you can have the other guy on the Griffin flying around, harrying the flanks, hunting war machines, etc. But yeah, at 2,000 points, I just don't, it's not worth it, in my opinion.
One thing I will just add on is, unlike a lot of the dragons and stuff, the Griffin doesn't take up a hero choice. It looks like I'm double checking myself.
Oh, I didn't even recognize that.
So that's something that happens for a lot of things. So if you do take him at 2K, at least you're not as punished as you would be if you took like a zombie dragon or something, where it's like, well, you're all in, you put all your eggs in this basket. Now, you put in a lot of eggs in the basket. It is 200 points, but Empire is also, as we'll get to, cheap enough that you could probably still take a number of eggs following this metaphor. But that's kind of all I got for him. I think he's solid. I wouldn't, if you were going to house rule, I think he's perfect.
I think he does the job. If you take him to bolster the line, he's standing in the middle, leading his men from the front. I think it's iconic, it's lore accurate, and it works for what you take him for at the price point you take him. Yeah,
and I'm going to end with this. I like that he's weak at fighting. I think
because it's human. And that's the whole thing.
Yeah, it tells a story. This is a guy who's probably been trained from birth in combat, but he's a politician, you know. So I kind of like that he's like a captain. You know?
That there is somebody in the army that could be better at him than fighting,
which
is the Templar
Grand Master. So this is a guy who's, I guess, been probably trained from birth or whatever. He was in the knightly orders, and he's leading a knightly order. This is the main guy. So he's I believe, the only source of weapon skill 6 in the entire book.
I believe that is true.
So he can go toe-to-toe and hit on 3s against most heroes in the game, which is, a big deal. And unique to him, he's expensive at 160 points. But he comes fully kitted. He's coming with a barded warhorse. He's coming with either a lance. Oh, no, he does come with a lance. And I believe you can give him the cavalry hammer for a little bit more. And you can give him 100 points because he's a lord. I mean, you could go to town with this guy, but honestly, like, giving him magic stuff, but he's pretty solid just base. Like, he's coming in on a 1-up armor save.
Yeah, which is awesome. So, I mean, maybe giving him a cool weapon to, strike first or something.
Sure. I mean, honestly, just keeping him with the lance is good. Strength 6 on the charge, 4 attacks. Again, because he's got the lord. This is like your fighty lord. So
absolutely. And that's what I think is so interesting is most armies' lord choices are combat oriented.
Right.
But it makes so much sense with the Empire that there is one that's more leadership oriented and one that's more combat oriented.
Right. That. He does still have leadership 9 too.
Yeah.
Worth noting. So as you're walking up, the thing is though is he's on a horse. He's going to be running up with a group of knights, and he's probably not going to be.
That's true. So him as the general is going to be out of position as well.
Unless, and again we'll get to it. Knights are a core choice here, so you could go really knight heavy, and if you're doing that, I mean, I think you'd be crazy not to take him as a lord at 2K. He also has the Grandmaster special rule.
Yeah, and that gives immune to psychology for, I think, the Inner Circle Knights, or the unit
he's with. I'll double check. In addition to, they gain immune to psychology. I think it's all knights. They're immune to psychology. In addition, is with the unit of knights of his order. The knights are inspired and so are immune. So I think as long as the unit he's with is just some knights, they get immune to psychology, which is, of course, fantastic because knights are typically smaller units. The big thing I see that there for is fear.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going to just auto-break from being outnumbered.
You run into the skeleton block and you whiff. You got the rubber lance syndrome or whatever. Then you don't care as much.
Yeah.
So, and this guy's going to bop in combat for the most part. So I don't think you need to give him a whole lot. He is expensive at 160, but he might be worth it because he comes with all the fixins.
Yeah, and again, compared to other combat heroes in other army books, he's still not that expensive.
Yeah, so. He's solid.
Yeah.
And again, I think his presence tells a story too. He's the leader of an order of knights. This is a guy who, if he shows up, it's a big deal. And I think you could build up to him in a campaign. Maybe his unit of knights in an earlier battle were ran off, and he's showing up to regain their honor or whatever, right? Yeah. You could do a lot of things with that. You just think about it a little bit. So I think I don't know if I would change anything. I think he's fine. Maybe a little overcosted. I don't know. But if he is, not enough to where I'd feel bad about him. We haven't really used him.
Yeah, I don't know that I've run him at all. You did maybe once.
I'm kind of theory hammering here a little bit, some might say. But just looking at him, I don't think he's terrible. I think he's okay.
I think he's fit for his points.
Yeah, I think he's solid. And then we can go into the final lord. Do you want to start off with that one?
Yeah, to be honest, it's hard to imagine taking a Wizard Lord under 3,000 points because, again, it's just so important to have that Leadership 9 as your general, and you only get one Lord, and the Lord is the only way you're getting Leadership 9, and so I would just be so afraid of my battle line crumbling to break test if I didn't have my Leadership 9 Lord that, it would just be tough for me to do that.
I think you're probably right, and if you were going to a competitive event for some reason, I don't know, maybe you're going to Resurrection, shout out to that guy, but I think I took a Wizard Lord against you at a 2K game, and I think I did pretty well that game. He was a Shadow Wizard.
You did do well that
game.
And
I think you can make him work. I actually think he's doable. I think if you're taking him, he works in a defensive skew. We kind of talked about in our 6th edition kind of review that magic missiles are kind of king in this edition. And if you take a level 4 wizard, you go like fire magic or shadow, and you get the nuke that ignores armor. There's some damage you can do from afar, and he provides some intangible benefits or whatever. The leadership 8 stinks for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think you can make him work if you're trying to, like, obviously if you don't want to lose a combat, but he allows you to skew combats through his influence in the early turns, hopefully with magic missiles,
just taking out some
to where that you're not losing those battles in the first play. Hopefully you're not taking a lot of panic checks, etc. But it definitely will come up. There's some pluses and minuses with them.
Yeah, and again, I think it matters a lot who you're going up against, how much magic they're bringing, that sort of a thing. Because in a lot of games, having just 1 or 2 level 2 wizards would be totally fine.
For sure.
But against some other people, you really would want to either have the Wizard Lord to take over the magic phase or be able to hold your own against, high elves or...
If you're taking him, I think you have to take at least one other battle wizard. Because if you're taking him, you're saying, I want magic to be a part of my force.
Yeah, and you got to lean in at that point.
And you got to lean in. So if you've got him plus another battle wizard, I think you can do some cool pairings with that. You probably want a captain somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think you lean in at that point and you just say, okay, we're skewing here. We're gonna try to make the guy come to me. Now, if the scenario doesn't necessitate that could be a bad play potentially. But there are some spells that give you movement. Shadow again, I think is pretty good. Fire is just a safe bet. Heavens is great. And that's kind of part of this guy's ability that's so fun, is he can take any of the core lores.
Yeah, which again is a cool thing tied into the lore of the Empire, is that they have all these colleges that were established by the high elves, and it's cool that they have that flexibility. Which
worth noting too, you can put him on a Pegasus, you can put him on a Warhorse. We don't really see that a lot in our group, but you could do it, and I could see a guy on a Pegasus riding around doing some nasty stuff with certain lores. Some of the more short-range lores. I could see somebody with life magic, maybe, because a lot of those spells, it's like if you're near a certain piece of terrain, or it's like 12 inches.
So you need that maneuverability.
Right, so if you just fly up next to somebody, it's like, oh, I don't even care that you're not by the hill, because I'm going to fly on your flank, you can't see me, and then, hey, eat these stones.
Yeah.
And there's some cool stuff I think you could do there. I think he's pretty solid. I don't think I'd change anything either. I think overall the Lord choices for me are all solid.
I think they are, yeah.
Okay, and then from there, I guess we'll just jump into the heroes. The captain, this is almost the milquetoast hero. He's dirt cheap, 50 points.
Oh, he's
50.
50, wow.
He's 50
Where did I
points.
Get 60 from?
You probably are going to give him plate armor.
Maybe that's what I'm
which
thinking
is plus
how
8.
I upgrade him. He usually ends up 60.
So you give him plate armor and a shield, and you don't give him anything else, he's 60.
Okay.
So that's going to cost 10 for plate armor and the shield.
Yeah, so cheap.
Really cheap. You probably want a BSB, so you'll probably want to have one.
At least one. The BSB, again, for Empire, it matters that their blocks don't turn tail and run. So getting to reroll those break tests is critical.
He's got a lot of options. I could see somebody maybe going great weapon with him. I don't love it. I kind of like building him a little more defensively, but I can see you doing it. Strength 6 is a lot. Worth noting, too, a thing that I think a lot of people don't look at is ballistic skill 5.
Yeah, which is so fascinating that he can be equally a combat or a ranged hero.
So there's like the dragon bow. Now I don't even necessarily think that's super competitive, but that's something that's kind of cute that you can do. Throw it on him. He's hitting at 3s at long range with like a strength 6 shot.
Especially at higher points levels where you have some extra hero slots just to play with that can be fun.
And you could just put him with handgunners. You could put him with some archers and you know, give him you can give him a longbow. It's expensive at 10 points, but you could put him in there, and then hey, that unit that you think is free that you charge with your like fell bats or whatever, now there's a captain in there and he might just shred the fell bats.
That's a great point.
There's some cute stuff in there. I think he's really flexible, and
he's super flexible, which again I think is like the story of the Empire Army is there's a lot of built-in flexibility to build it totally different ways, which is really interesting. I do wish there was some way to give him +1 leadership, some even expensive magic item.
Sure.
Because that way you could still have him be your general and put your electro count on the Griffin and go fly off with him other places. That would just be really nice.
For sure.
I think the Empire Captain is one of the main reasons I wish there was an allowance to take other magic items on a magic BSB. Because he's so weak without other magic defense. Like the fact that you can't put Armor of Meteoric Iron on him and Griffin Banner is really tough. Obviously, you know, with other options like the Great Swords can just take a magic banner. So I guess you can give them the Griffin Banner and just have the captain with a normal BSB and maybe it works out that way. But yeah, I think just because he's so weak to begin with, it just hurts even more that you can't give him additional magical items with a magic banner.
Yeah, no, he definitely feels it. He's not going to win any duels by himself. I mean, he can.
Yeah, maybe against some champions.
Against some champions. Against most other heroes, he's either on par or below. He's not... But again, he's cheap. Yeah. So what you're saving there is going to be more bodies somewhere else.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go super heavy combat with him, but I do hear, and I've read online, again, I don't think we ran him this way, him on a Pegasus ain't bad.
Yeah, I just built one, converted one. Yeah, I've run him once, and I think that might have been the one Old World game we tried, and we ended early. So I don't think I really did anything with him. But I do think that would be, because he's so cheap, it'd be an effective way to go hunt war machines or lone wizards or things like that. I feel like
him on a Pegasus into a war machine crew, he's going to shred them.
Yeah, and honestly, even if he just gets shot by a magic missile, that's still not that many points, and it saved one of your units getting it and maybe breaking and panicking because of it. Yeah.
I think this dude's name of the game is flexibility, and then from a narrative perspective, he's whatever you want him to be.
Yeah, so much opportunity for you to just have characters in your army that are counts and barons and, you know, whoever.
Yeah, he could be some mook who just rose through the ranks, you know, because I think in the lore, Empire is a little more like, it's not about who you are, it's what you did. Yeah. They're a little more meritocracy based, you know, whereas Bretonnia is like, I'm the son of a noble.
Yeah.
Not that means nothing here, but...
there's at least the opportunity for this guy to have risen through the ranks.
This could be like his dad was like a peasant or whatever. His dad was a farmer, but now he like grew up and rose through the ranks in the military, and I think that's really cool. He's an open book, but solid. I wouldn't change anything about him.
Yeah,
I know you mentioned maybe if we had a magic item for Leadership 9, that would be cool. Maybe for like 50 points or something. But I think he's a solid. And we'll jump into the next kind of melee character, the Warrior Priest. I'm curious what you think of this guy, because I think he's probably the one I have the most to say about.
Yeah, the Warrior Priest seems so cool. The lore is so cool. The models are so cool. But it feels like they never live up to how much they cost, which is so disappointing. And I think this is one of the biggest disappointments between how it works on the battlefield and how it feels like it should in the lore in the whole Army book. Which sucks, because again, I really love them. It's so iconic. There's some really great art of warrior priests throughout the book.
Sure.
And it just, it would be cool if they worked a little better. And I think they seem handy, where it's like, it kind of has like built-in bound spells, which can be really helpful in the magic phase to use up dispel dice, or to just be able to get them off after your opponent's used up their dispel dice, sort of a thing. But because of the nature of those prayers that he has, you can't use them in the first couple of turns, because you need to be close or already have taken wounds to use them. And then even when you do get into combat, one of them only works against undead, I think. And then the
Hatred one is only against undead and chaos, and Skaven too, I think.
And he's 95 points?
He's 95. Almost double a captain.
Yeah, and so he's just not bringing enough to the table to really warrant that. And Yeah, if there was a couple, like if he was bolstering the whole unit, like boosting weapon skill or strength or something, or I don't know. There are other ways he could be way cooler, but I taken him even against undead. He didn't really feel like he did anything useful.
He wasn't. Yeah, the problem is undead's usually brimming with magic, and so they see the bound spell and they're like, well, I'll just stop that. And sure, that does give you some value. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but
that's if you've leaned into magic otherwise, which again, you already are one slot down because you took the priest. So
sure. For me, he's unfortunately kind of relegated to being good in maybe a campaign setting where you know you're going to have a chaos opponent, you know you're going to have an undead opponent or Skaven or something where his buffs come into play consistently. Sure, he gives you a dispel die. I think that's something cool, and I like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how much that typically costs to get magic resistance 1 with other magic items, it's worth something.
It's pretty solid. What I don't think he's worth it though if you're just taking like just into anything. You know, you don't know what you're going to fight against if you're trying to be like super competitive. Maybe I'm wrong there. I just don't see the value. I'd rather take a battle wizard at that point.
Same, absolutely.
And he's not fighty enough to justify it because he's
only the captain. Yeah,
he's got 2 attacks. It's the biggest thing. He's weapon skill 4 as well, so his worst weapon skill. 1 less attack, which really adds up. You're probably going to give him a great weapon because I think, well, for one, that just seems fluffy. Give him a big 2-handed hammer. And he can't take plate armor either. So he's just he's missing a lot that I
all
want.
Aspects. Yeah.
Right. Sure. I'm sure there's some ways you can make him work that I'm probably haven't looked into or I'm missing, but I feel like generally I'm let down. What I would change is, and I think they did this in later editions, make him more like a chaplain in 40K. Just have him give the unit hatred all the time. They should just be in a fervor or something, like just riled up. Like he's there, he's speaking to the guys, he's riling them up. Give him hatred. Have him. He's saying bad things about who they're about to come into combat with. Have him reroll on their first turn of combat. I think that might not be enough, but I think that's a big enough deal.
Bigger than it currently is.
Yeah, because now that happens situationally. But like, you know, I want to have hatred against high elves. Why can't he be angry about high elves? You know, like so. I feel like that would be an easy change, or maybe you lower his points cost to what, I don't know. But I think for me, the easy thing to do is to just give him hatred all the time. Maybe if you really want to experiment with your house ruling, you look into changing some of his bound spells, because they are kind of situational. Maybe look at later
that'd be obviously
editions.
A bigger change where there'd be more cascading consequences from that. But I do agree, I would love to have just bound spells, the prayers that feel a little more utilitarian. I mean, again, it'd be so helpful to just for one turn have magic weapons against ethereal opponents or something like that. So like little things like that could be so helpful.
Right, and maybe even as a starting point, look at other editions, see what he does there. I'm sure I haven't looked specifically at 7th ed or 8th ed fantasy for warrior priests and arch lectors, which they get a lord version later.
Well, maybe we'll play with it sometime.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. But I think this is kind of the it's actually not. I guess we'll just go into the next one. The Master Engineer. I think he's so cool from a narrative perspective. I think he's awesome. I love the whole like tech guy. Not every army gets anything like this. The dwarves are pretty much the only other one. And I love that he shows up. I love what he does. I love all the rules. I just hate the execution. And the problem is more than anything, I think he's a little overcosted. But the problem is he takes a slot. This is one of those heroes where I think he benefits from a percentage system where, I've got a pool of 400 points or whatever to take to spend on heroes and lords. Okay, 55 ain't the worst.
And I mean, I think that's true of Empire in general because they have such cheap heroes. It ends up feeling like you're not getting as much hero out of your slots as anybody else is.
Right, so because he's using a hero slot, you have to compare and contrast with everybody else on the list, namely captains. And the captain is so versatile and so good for his points, I think, because he's so cheap, that it's hard to justify a master engineer, and his rules aren't good enough, I don't think.
Unless you roll misfires like I do, then being able to re-roll that is huge. Although I've re-rolled misfires
into
after
a misfire.
So,
so it's not even...
the fact that it's not even guaranteed is definitely tough.
It certainly makes it a lot harder. I'm not sure what I would change because it's like you're affecting the core rules if you're changing slots and stuff. I don't know. Maybe you make him into like an attachment for a cannon or something.
I mean, that's how the 6.5 dwarf.
Is that what they did?
Armybook does it. You can have a master engineer that's a hero, but you can have a normal engineer that's a little less good, but that is just like buying a champion. Yeah. So I think that would be a good fix for it. Obviously, pointing it out correctly might be tough, but I think it might just be one of those things you just take at higher points levels, and he just wouldn't show up otherwise.
Right,
you know?
And I think that's unfortunate. Maybe a thing, too, you could do, give him a gun to start with. He doesn't get a gun. You have to pay for a gun. Can he have a repeating pistol or something, or a repeater handgun? He's a special dude. He should have a cool special signature weapon that you don't have to pay on top of his base cost.
That would be nice.
I don't like that he just comes with a hand weapon.
Yeah.
I think it'd be cool if, hey, maybe this turn the cannon can't see anything. Well, I'm going to shoot these blokes who are really close up with my repeater handgun that doesn't cost 15 points.
Yeah, I will say the Hochland long rifle does seem really cool, and to get a 3,000 point game or something, I would be interested in taking him anyways just to play with it. But the fact that you could just snipe wizards out of units,
snipe champions,
pretty amazing. So I think it's something to explore there at least.
I think he's not like the worst hero in the game or anything, but
like you said, just compared to the other options with limited slots.
Yeah, the core rules of army building limit him because he's taking a slot, and it's just an opportunity cost issue. So that's all I really have to say on him. Leadership 7 too. He's not winning you any. Yeah,
I mean, you've really just take him to reroll those misrolls.
That's really what he ends up being. It's like, well, do I have a cannon or something that I want to not blow up? Hopefully, no. Maybe he got 55 points. You could throw him in there.
Yeah.
And then finally, the Battle Wizard. I kind of feel similar about him as I do the Wizard Lord. I think he's a little plain. He's a little milquetoast, but because of that, he can be whatever you want him to be. He's probably necessary, I would think, if you're trying to do well, at least a one of. And we have a lot of feelings about Dispel Scrolls, but the more I played, the more I think it's cool to have one. I could see just like almost, I don't want to say auto-include because I think you can do so much narratively, but if you're just kind of going into a game against somebody and you guys are just getting into the system and you don't know, and you think, oh man, he's going to take a lot of magic, and I don't want to. You could take a level 1 Battle Wizard, throw a Dispel Scroll on him, and I don't think it's terrible.
Yeah, and that one time where there's some really critical moment where you really need it not to happen, then you have it. Yeah.
And it just him existing gives you another Dispel die.
Yeah, which is huge, because that can stop something every now and again.
Yeah, and just, I don't know, take him as whatever lore you think is cool. If you just want a magic missile, put him fire or death, you know, and just...
So the versatility. And I will say, I know we're going to talk about magic items later, but the wizard staff is so cheap to let him roll an extra die on a spell that can be huge, especially if you're only going to take one, because otherwise you have 3 dice on one spell and 1 die on another spell. If you take that wizard staff, then you get 4 dice on one spell, which could be a big deal.
Yeah.
So
I think, you spike a roll, you'll actually might get a spell through with just a 1 wizard, even if they've got 2.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely an interesting way to run it.
He's definitely takeable. I wouldn't change him at all. I think he's fairly costed. Again, you could kind of build the narrative around him. Is he a death wizard? Is he hooded? He's carrying a scythe? He's kind of creepy.
Yeah, again, so many modeling opportunities. Yeah.
Is he a beast wizard? So he's like a shaman, you know, he's kind of grunting. He doesn't, nobody around him likes him because he likes to be around. He smells bad. He talks to birds, you know. Yeah. He's a little odd. A lot of narrative opportunities there. And that kind of wraps up the Lords and Heroes. Overall, I think they're solid.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of guys that are not as good, but you can, like even the Warrior Priest, I think you can totally win games taking a Warrior Priest. Sub 2K.
If everything else in your army is working well, then that won't.
I don't think it's like, oh man, you took him, you're going to lose the game. I don't think there's really anything quite that bad.
No,
is he
especially
optimal?
Just because everything's so cheap in this book that it's hard to have one choice sink the whole list. Yeah.
Speeding up here into the core units, I think we can lump up kind of a lot of these together.
Troops,
and we'll maybe go by melee versus ranged. So halberdiers, spearmen, swordsmen. A lot has probably been written online about this.
Oh yeah. It's one of the key things people talk about with Sixth Ed Empire.
So swordsmen are good. The other two kind of aren't, unfortunately.
And the reason for that is just the higher weapon skill is so much better, and the sword and board bonus is so much better, and they don't cost more. So like, why would you not take them?
Right. Halberdiers, I could see rules as written, taking them as a detachment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because again, that flank charge with the extra strength could really help in some situations.
Spearmen, I think you can take them and you can win. We've had games with big units of spears, and I think Empire has done okay, and they can win combat. It's just they're worse than swordsmen.
And I take them because I only have one unit of swordsmen, and I have one unit of spearmen, so they get to both come.
Right, and they're cool. I like them from a lore perspective because spears are... Historically, they're the cheap weapon.
Right.
And if you're
doesn't take a lot of training.
Right, and maybe if you're playing like, I don't know, Ostland or something, one of the less like affluent provinces or whatever, it makes sense narratively. Maybe you got more spearmen or something. I like that. I wish they were better. That's kind of spears in 6th ed most of the time, though, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
What I would do to fix this is I drop halberdiers and spearmen 1 point.
I think that would work. I think, honestly, increasing their weapon skill to 4 would be cool and lore accurate because they're described as being one of the only professional armies in the old world that literally drills and trains every day.
Okay.
And so I think just boosting them also to the weapon skill 4, and then the bonus you're getting is the thing that the spear does instead of the thing that the shield and sword does. And then it feels like it's now even.
Would you buff the initiative as well?
I forgot they had higher initiative. I think that would, because again, it feels like getting to attack in an extra rank is equivalent to getting the +1 armor save on the shield. Getting the +1 strength is equivalent to getting the +1 armor from the shield. So it feels like if you give them the stat bonuses, it feels more like they are trained, disciplined troops in a professional army, and I think it mitigates the discrepancy between those options. So I think either would work, drop them a point, or you could just boost those stats.
Yeah, so I think that kind of sums it up. If you're playing rules as written and you're trying to win, probably go swordsman as most of your parent units. Spearmen and halberdiers can work in certain situations, but they're probably not optimal, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we haven't really tried it out with those changes. So I think that's something that would be fun to do, is just to run those options and just see how it feels.
Right. And then kind of going to the ranged ones, maybe we'll do this in 2 kind of pairs. I'm going to put handgunners and crossbowmen together because I think they operate very similarly.
Yeah, they can't move and shoot, so they're both kind of stuck where they're at. Yeah,
both 8 points. The minimum unit size is 10.
Yeah. Now, I will say it almost seems pointless to take crossbows. I know we just played a game where your crossbowmen did absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
but because most of the time you're deploying 24 inches apart, the 30-inch range isn't as big of a deal. Right. And because handguns in the Empire get an extra D6-inch range the first time they fire, it really feels like for the same price, you're just getting an extra armor piercing from the handguns. So it seems most of the time, why would you even take the crossbows?
The only thing for crossbowmen is they have a longer short range. And it's 3 inches.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
That's if you think you're going to be playing really cagey for some reason, everybody's going to be not charging. They're all trying to get the first charge. Crossbowmen might be better.
Yeah, the armor piercing doesn't matter if you didn't hit them.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. You're probably right. I think if you don't know what, they're close enough that I don't think you're super.
Yeah, like you said, it's not going to wreck your army if you choose one or the other. And like we said, you did really well with them in the last game we played, and you were cutting my guys down.
There's certain matchups where the armor isn't as good, that the -1 AP doesn't matter, and maybe you'd just rather have the longer short range.
And they are strength 4, so they still are -1 on their own.
Sure. So I think they're both playable. I think they're hard to take as parent units because 10, unless you know you have a hill.
Exactly.
Which you can't know, at least the way we play games. We kind of set up the terrain
definitely think as detachments, they're the best option. I will also say that handgunners at 8 points, they're 8 points, right?
Yep.
Is wild after having played dwarfs, and their thunderers are so much more expensive. Obviously, there's reasons for that, but having the armor piercing at that price is amazing. So again, that idea of taking 6 detachments of 6 handgunners each, I would love to try that because that sounds devastating.
Yeah, this is really where you start to see the power, because no other army can really take this much strength 4 shooting in mass. Like dwarves have access, but as you just said, because they're leadership 9 and tough 4, they're paying arms and legs for each guy. This, you just like throw guns down, throw crossbowmen down. You're gonna have so many shots. Sure, they're ballistic skill 3, but you're gonna shoot so much, and it's good strength and armor piercing. You're gonna kill guys, and I can see this is where probably some people might say, oh, it's a gun line army and it's not fun. But they kind of have to have that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's one of the combined arms aspects that if you're not playing with all of those aspects, then the other parts of the army just don't work. Don't punch at the level they need to be.
So I think they're solid. Again, I don't think you need to change them at all. I think they're perfect as they are.
Yeah. I have one more thought just on the idea of state troops generally.
Okay.
The Army book lumps all those together as the state troops versus the militia, which is interesting since it has no mechanical meaning in the game.
Can militia be parent units?
Oh, maybe that's what it is.
I don't know.
That might be the
You might have to double check that, listeners.
Anyways, like I said, they're described in the lore as being one of the only professional armies. They're training all day, every day. Now, I get that they're not, chaos magic, superhuman dudes or, that sort of a thing. But it does feel like they are a little weak when it comes to the way that they're supposed to fight, which is in the big blocks. Now, the static combat res can go a long way, but one bad break test and they're just gone. And so, even something that would make them more likely to hold on the first round of combat or something like that, which I'm just making up brand new rules now that don't even exist in the game.
I think in 7th ed, the elector count or something, and don't quote me on this, gets like hold the line or something. Okay. And there might be something where I think it would be cool if a character could like give a unit stubborn.
Yeah, like and something like that.
A turn.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So stubborn for one turn, or like the first round of combat, they just get their max, or maybe they get it as long as they have max rank bonus, because it's like we're the block we were supposed to be. Things are going well, and then it's less likely that you just have a weird corner case situation that causes them to break over nothing. But yeah, I don't know. It just would be, again, speaking purely about lore versus how they play on the table. It just doesn't really feel like they live up right now to the professional soldier thing. Swordsmen maybe do because of their weapon skill.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just a
Swordsmen are solid. I think they're kind of the bar that most infantry in this game want to be.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we would add that at no cost. I think they would be more expensive adding that, but I think it would just make them feel more like they're the professional army on the table that's less likely to cut and run at the drop of a hat. That feels more like what the Free Company would do.
Right.
But they really don't feel that much different than Free Company.
Yeah, Free Company on the table feel like they're just more of the same, other than lore-wise, they're rabble. So I guess let's talk about the militia. I think we have to do this separately because they're different enough. Free Company they're described as the rabble. They're the drunkards. They're the guys in the town over that are showing up to fight. On the table, they're pretty solid. They're 5 points each. They have no armor, but you don't care. They're 5 points each. They're just humans, 3s across the board, but they have basically additional hand weapons, so 2 attacks each. Great as a detachment for flank charging. If you can get them in, they're just going to go in, and they're cheap enough that you could bring 8 of them for 40 points or whatever, or you could bring 5 of them for 25, And
I've been building more and more Free Company models just because they do seem really good to just run in blocks. Obviously, they're great as detachments for those extra attacks, but running just big blocks of them sounds awesome.
Yeah.
If you compare them to like Bretonnian peasants, which are the same price, but these guys have better weapon skill, better leadership, 2 attacks. Obviously, they have no armor, and they don't have the +1 strength.
Sure.
But I think I would pick these guys over the Bretonnian peasants.
Yeah, weapon skill 2 really stinks in a lot of situations. I think they're phenomenal. I think they're really good. They still get access to full command.
Which is wild again. Yeah, it's not what you would expect.
So they're not just a bunch of drunkards. I guess if somebody showed up with a flag.
And I like the way that they're described. I think earlier in the book, they talk about like these could be old veterans that have been on campaign for years, but now they are too unruly to really be in the like proper army. And so they are just drunk hanging out at the tavern.
I see.
So yeah, there is that aspect of I think they maybe were trained at one point.
Well, narratively, then that really opens up some cool things because they could be like you think of those old veteran units in like real world wars or stuff that have
they've been through it.
They're the grizzled veterans and they have cool names. You could do a lot with Free Company. Sure, they could just be the peasants, the drunkards,
guys you just rounded up for the battle.
But they could be the Black Watch. They could be all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely.
So they're really cool. I think they're solid. Wouldn't change them at all.
Yeah.
Archers, I think, are a star of the list. They're phenomenal. Skirmish is really good in 6th.
Yeah, this is the only skirmish option that this list, that this army list has. So.
This, to me, you can bring them. This is probably one of, if you're playing more aggressive with infantry, I think you need to have a lot of archers. And here's why. You want them as a screen. So you're going to bring this
Absolutely.
as a detachment, and you're going to run them in front of your guys, so you can't be shot at. They're going to have to shoot at the archers.
Yep.
They can move and shoot, so you're moving up, and maybe you're moving up only 4. Maybe you're marching 8 and you can't shoot, but you don't care. They're not that expensive to where if they die in mass to a fireball, you don't really care.
Yep, and again, don't cause panic
Don't
because they're
cause
detachments.
panic because they're a detachment. Skirmish, just so good. If you want to, you can take a unit of huntsmen for 2 points a model, so that'll make them 10 each. What that basically does is they get scout, I believe. Scouts, and they get a longbow. I think that's worth it. I think it gives you an option to march block.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if there is like a nicely placed woods somewhere where you can get right up there.
I don't think that hurts at all. I think archers are a star of the list for me. They really let you play your way. If you're more defensive, I think you want to go more handgunners, crossbowmen. But if you want to go out and reach out and touch someone, I think archers let you do that.
Exactly. It doesn't make you have to be as static.
Right. So just because they can move and shoot, and just because they're so flexible, because they're skirmishers, they can get out of the way.
Yeah.
You know, they can flee between blocks. They're just, I don't know. I love them a lot. I think they're solid. What do you think?
I totally agree. I think it's sometimes hard to want to choose them because of their lack of power.
Yeah.
But the fact that, like, well, if you're not even shooting the guns because you have to move, then you're not getting any of that power anyways. So, yeah. And I think, like you said, skirmisher is just super good in 6th. So,
right. Yeah. They're hard. Choice. Just being -1 to hit from other shooting. Yeah, they're going to last that much longer. So I think they're phenomenal. And then I guess the final, I'm going to call these the same thing. I know there are 2 lists in the book, but knights.
Yeah.
So you get a choice between a lance or a cav hammer. We haven't really played with Knights of the White Wolf. I think they're fine, though, looking at them.
They seem great. I mean, I like the idea of spreading your strength bonus out across the combat rather than punching it all into that very first round, because the dice with especially only 5 knights or something can really just, you can biff on the roll. So I do like that idea. I just don't have the models for it, so I've never tried it.
2-up armor save is still good.
Yeah.
So not having the 1-up, the 1-up's great. Don't get me wrong. I love the 1-up armor save, but a 2-up's still really solid. They are a little bit more points, but I think if you don't want an inner circle choice, I think the White Wolf are probably better. But, you know, 1-ups are really good.
Yeah.
So I think they're solid. I love that they're core.
Yeah, that's
leadership
awesome.
8.
Yep. And I think this would be so amazing if Bretonia didn't exist. Like, this would be some of the best cavalry in the game since their core and all the options that they have. Obviously, they're completely outclassed by Bretonia, but that's Bretonia's whole thing. So you would expect that to be true.
They have some cool stuff. Steel Banner can give them some extra charge range, and they can take a magic banner, so you can give them a war banner. You can do a lot of stuff with them.
And because they're core, I would love to, if I didn't hate painting horses so much, do a cavalry army. I think that would be so awesome, just to run a bunch more cavalry, lead with the Templar Grandmaster, have a couple variations of the 2 different unit types.
Might be cheap enough. You might actually be okay running a big block of 10. I don't know. Maybe not. I'm generally like take them in 1 rank, go 6 wide.
If I was doing a whole army of them, though, I think, why not?
You might take 10 just for the rank bonus, and then maybe outnumbering somebody.
Yeah, with the 2 per model.
2 per model, you get 10.
After
that's
you
a unit
do a
20.
big hit, You
know, I could see it working, and they're hard to kill.
Absolutely.
Tough 3 stinks, but it doesn't even stink. It's not great, is what I'll say.
Right, but with the 1-up armor save, huge,
they don't die a lot. Now, there are some spells that ignore armor, and there are some things that do that, and they're going to be magnets for those. But they're fast enough to where you might even be able to just run away from those things, depending on what they are. So, really solid. Leadership 8 is also great. They don't have to be tied to a captain. They can run them off on a flank and do heavy cav things. In the flank of something that's in combat, they're probably going to break whatever is there, unless it's unbreakable or stubborn.
And again, I think this is where that mixed unit tactics really comes in, is if they're working in cooperation with the big blocks of state troops, that just amplifies both of their abilities.
Yeah, they're really solid overall. I think they're kind of perfect. I don't know what I would do differently. And the inner circle option is really good. I struggle to not take it. 3 points per model is not nothing, because that's 15
it does
points
add
minimum.
Up. Yeah.
Because you have to take at least 5. But I love me some strength 4. I love me some strength 6. And I'd be hard pressed to I would try to find the 15 points for it.
Absolutely.
So
it's hard to get that much bang for your buck with 15 points other places in the list.
If you're playing a really, really small game, you're doing like sub 750, which we've done in slow grow leagues. Maybe you don't need it because there's not going to be a lot of crazy stuff going on.
Right.
And you'd rather have the bodies at that point.
Yeah.
But
if you think about it, that's 2 more state troops. So
right. Yeah. That's true. Maybe you'd just rather have the strength 4. I don't know. It's hard for me to say no to the inner circle.
Totally.
And then we're into special. Try to move swiftly here. We'll start with great swords. These are limited 0-1, so you can only have 1 in the army no matter what.
And again, I think that's lore reasons, is they say this is the most trained elite people that are the bodyguard of the count. So there's only 1 unit.
Weapon skill 4, they get full plate, which I love. This is, I think, out of a lot of elite infantry, these ones approach acceptable.
Yeah, I think primarily because of that full plate.
Full plate, having a 4-up armor save all the time, it just makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
Stubborn is also obviously great with Leadership 8. If you're taking these, I think you're taking a BSB because Leadership 8 rerollable. You're not going to fail significant amount of time. Obviously, you will still sometimes, and that will really stink, but these guys are good enough that they might just win combats from you statically. They can take a magic standard up to 50 points. We'll get to it, I'm sure, later, but the Griffin banner on these guys
it's a great choice.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
In a list where there's not a lot of units, I think that an opponent looks at across the table and says that 1 unit is a problem. Great swords with a Griffin banner is a problem.
Is that,
because there's not a lot that's going to win.
Yeah.
They're even if they kill nothing, which they're going to kill something. They're strength 5. I mean, they're chopping boys.
Yeah. Well, the time they don't kill something is when you lost your whole front rank, which happens a lot. Which again, maybe is just because we play against Minotaurs and Bretonia, they always outcharge. But I think that's the one downside to them is that they just, because they always will strike last. And with toughness 3, it's just really easy to end up without anybody left to hit back.
For sure.
Now the plate really helps with that, and I often forget that that's the case. I always, for some reason, think they only have heavy armor.
Right.
But yeah, that's their one downside, which I don't think makes them not good by any means. But I also just love that they get that stubborn, even if the elector count isn't with them. Yeah. I'm pretty sure like the dwarf hammers, the king has to be in the unit. They have like
bodyguard or whatever. Yeah.
So that is huge. The fact that they can run solo and still get stubborn. So yeah, definitely, I think.
Yeah. So you can anchor a flank with them or something. They're versatile. And again, a source of high strength consistently. So these guys can be your dudes to chop up high toughness targets
or heavily armored stuff,
heavily armored stuff and actually kill things. So I think they present a problem for a lot of armies potentially. Although, again, something I think you guys will see from me in a through line of these books, I think you could make them cheaper if you wanted to house rule them. 7th Ed, they made them 10 points, and I don't think they're too good. I think you could totally make them 10 points. They're not that much better than swordsmen. And again, swordsmen are a high bar. I think they're the they're the standard that every infantry aspires
that
to.
They were,
because 7 points for that stat line is great. I think you could make these guys 10. Stubborn is big, no doubt, but they're the same weapon skill.
Yeah.
And so you're getting stubborn, a great sword, and leadership 8. I don't know. I'm a mixed mind, but strikes last is bad too.
Yeah, especially with toughness 3 when you might not be alive to strike back.
It's not free. I don't know. I could see. I would say try them with 10. See what you think.
I'll try them with 10.
If you guys, I know you will. If viewers think or listeners think that's too much, I think they're fine at 12. Totally playable.
Definitely. And I think like you had mentioned earlier with the detachments, the goal of that is to put your opponent in a situation where they don't have any good options. And I think the greatsword unit, because of the psychological effect it has, especially with the Griffin banner, that's the unit you can do that with. Because when you threaten with that unit, they have to do something, and that can disrupt what their plan was.
Greatsword's on the charge. You don't want to get charged by, that's going to be, even if they're only 5 wide, which frankly I would go 6 if you can afford it. You get 6 attacks, not counting a character if you include one, that are weapon skill 4, strength 5, you're going to kill some guys.
Absolutely. And so, I think that's a key unit to be able to force your opponent's hand and help the detachment rule end up working with some of your state troops.
Absolutely. I think maybe not a star, but a unit that I think deserves its place in a collection.
Absolutely.
And then going from there, Pistoliers. These are my favorite unit in the
Absolutely amazing in this edition.
My favorite unit in the book. I think Fast Cav is awesome.
In general in this edition, yeah, but the fact that they have this
they're good at everything,
rule
man.
For the first round of combat, yeah, powerful stuff.
Yeah, so they shoot stuff. They shoot in melee in the first turn. They're going to shred things.
With both pistols, yeah. So I think this again it's easy, I think, from a new player perspective to see some of these things and be like, well, I just have to throw them right into a big unit and I'll tear them up. And that is absolutely not what they're for. But when you use them against the right unit that's low armor or low toughness and you're hitting them from the flank or something, then yeah, you're going to absolutely shred them.
I feel like they present a problem. Again, not an unsolvable one.
No, because they're not particularly...
They're not hard to kill with shooting or magic. That I acknowledge for sure. But there's something that you have to be aware of. And because they're so fast, you can just screen them with anything. A lot of times when I'll play Empire, I'll keep them in the back.
And they're a great reaction force.
Yeah, you think, oh, they have flyers. They're going to fly behind me. Keep some Pistoliers back there, man. If you're worried if they've got flyer spam.
Yeah,
you
help
can just
protect your war machines,
react,
your flanks.
and they'll just put 10 shots into whatever flew behind you.
Yeah.
Oh, they got a Pegasus. They flew behind me. Just nuke it.
Yeah.
Nuke that
and then
Pegasus.
with their charge range, they're threatening on that as well, knowing that first round of combat is going to be devastating.
Super, super good. They'll let you kind of react, and if they're a slow force that you're playing against or something without the ability to shoot, if you're playing against Beastmen or Chaos or something, with like not a lot of magic and shooting, Khorne Beastmen, I mean, I feel like you could have your way with stuff with these guys, present a real issue potentially.
Yeah, especially with Fast Cav, if they're well positioned, being able to rally after fleeing
and
from the charge, is huge. I think obviously they're already really good, so I'm not saying that they should have this rule, but can you imagine them with the Lizardmen Pterodon hit and run rule, where they can choose to flee after the first round of combat?
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
That would be...
I'd pay extra points for that.
That would be pretty nutty. I like them from a lore perspective too, just bringing that up. They're said they're like the sons of the nobles.
Yeah, that are too
kind of haughty.
Yeah, too impetuous to be knights yet. Yeah.
They're the equivalent, I guess, of the errants in Bretonnia. They're the guys who are just, their blood's up. They want to prove themselves, but in a very different way, you know. It's just, they've got guns.
Yeah, and again, feels very characteristic of... Renaissance, Wars of Religion type army and how they operate. So,
only thing I guess I would say that maybe brings them down a notch, and I wouldn't improve this because I think they're good enough as is Leadership 7. So if you don't have a character with them, which frankly I don't do that often, and they're fast enough that they're not going to always be in your character's range. If a panic check
they could
does
just
happen,
out.
They might just flee for sure. You take 2 to shooting that die. You take a panic check and you fail. They're out now. They're not so expensive that your life is ruined. It's 95 points for 5 base, but just worth noting. So one of those things to keep in mind. But I think they're amazing.
Yeah, and you could put a captain with them with a pistol.
Yeah,
because that's an option. Because again, flexibility.
Captains are great. Ballistic skill 5. Yeah, you give them a repeating something or whatever, repeating handgun in that guy. Do some crazy stuff. But really good. And then I'm just gonna say we do these artillery pieces kind of together. Cannon and mortar.
That's fine.
The cannon I think is what people think of when they think of Empire. They think of, oh, they're going to have artillery.
Yeah, big artillery line.
They're going to shoot me to death, and it's going to be really annoying. And it can be that way. I'll say after playing a lot against and with some artillery, I think the cannon is very swingy, obviously.
Yeah, I killed your Stegodon in one shot, and that sucked, but other times it just blows up.
Sometimes it does absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You can get very good at guessing. But depending on what you're shooting at, you pull off a couple Saurus warriors, you're like, I mean, that's good, I guess. But 100 points you could have over, that's 10 handgunners or whatever. What's good about it is it lets you put a lot of that power into a small footprint because you're going to be putting down a lot of units as Empire.
Yeah,
and that's almost more important than anything.
But that being said, it can also be hard to position. I mean, we ran into this in the last battle we did where we swapped armies, and it's just kind of like, where do I put my cannon and Hellblaster? There's just not really a spot.
I think I had to put it way down on the flank, and I had a few okay turns. It didn't do amazing. I think it did fine, and then it got ran into by chameleon skinks, I believe, and died. But
I think it's not too expensive for what it is. I think it performs often enough that it's worth taking. I think it is really good against heavily armored opponents like Bretonnian Knights. Because if you take out 2 or 3 of them with one of those shots, that is huge.
Yes. Yeah. Or monsters where this book might struggle.
Yeah. Otherwise, without heroes and other monsters.
I know it did one shot the Stegodon, but like the Stegodon might be hard to deal with otherwise.
And it has been, because I've only done that once, and the other time it got into my lines.
Indeed. So, and then the mortar, I'll be honest, I was kind of low on this for a long time. I think the mortar's amazing.
I think it's great. It just depends on who you're against. Horrible against something like Bretonnia, unless they have some peasant blocks. Okay. Amazing against something like Goblins and Skaven, because low toughness and big ranks is what it's good against.
Sure. I think it's got a little bit of the engineer problem, where it's a problem of slots. Because in a 2,000 point game, I think you get 4 specials?
I think so, yeah.
So at that, you probably take one. At lower than 2,000 points, I think you kind of start to run into, especially at like 1,500
Yeah, I would only take it at the higher points level.
It gets hard to fit in from a slot perspective. It's cheap at 75, and if it was just a points, again, a percentage thing, I think I'd almost always have one.
Yeah.
But it's a slot issue. But I feel like every time I've taken it, which has admittedly only been like once or twice, I think, it's done really well. I know the last time we played, I think against a Chaos versus Empire situation, I had one and it killed a ton of Marauders.
Yeah, that's the type. I mean, and that's not even its best target because they have a bigger base size. But yeah.
Sure, but like I felt like it did a lot of work.
The fact that they're lower armor,
Yeah, and usually, and those are the units that we've been kind of saying are really good in this version for infantry.
Yeah, so anything that can disrupt a big infantry formation like that is great. And can you imagine that against, like, nobody plays Skaven or Goblins yet, so we haven't seen it, but can you imagine a mortar shell landing in the middle of one of those units?
As a future Skaven player, yes. And
it
will be bad. A lot of slaves will die, but there's more where those came from. But I think it's solid. I think both pieces of artillery are good. I think the mortar gets a bad rep, but I think it's more an issue of opportunity cost with the other special slots, but it's totally worth it. I would say if you're playing Empire, totally worth having one.
Yeah, and I love that it's unique to the Empire. It's not just like, well, everybody has a mortar. It's just like, feels like, no, they invented this and it's their weapon, which is cool. And then same obviously with the Hellblaster volley gun, which is really good.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, even when it misfires, you have to roll pretty bad for it to really ruin your day. And of some of the results, you even still keep shooting anyways.
This thing is you put it down, and I think you make like a no-fly zone.
Yeah, almost. Absolutely. I think a key, especially when you say the word fly, is to make sure it's in a spot where a unit of flyers can't actually charge it because it's between 2 other units, because that's happened to me before where I deployed it right up at the front of my line and then you've charged it with pterodons or something because it was a little too far forward, so you were able to do that. But if you just make sure you keep units on either side, then I think you can protect it.
On a flank too, because like you see people put heavy cav on the flank a lot.
You just tear them to shreds.
They can't even move up at you because even at 24 inches, this thing is
the fact that it has that range is wild.
And it gets weaker after 12 inches, so between 12 and 24, but it's still pretty scary. And I believe this one of the guns that does the silly thing where it just hits.
Yeah, it's just you're rolling the number of hits that you get like a salamander.
As we go through the books, I'm sure you guys will hear there's a tendency in 6th edition. I don't know what the designers saw a lot of these crazy weapons and they're like, we'll just see how many times it gets hit, and that's to represent, I assume, it just shoots so much
just
that it
crazy
couldn't possibly
fusillade
miss,
of bullets.
Which is cool, but it's very powerful, especially with the strength that they're coming in at. I think in 12 inches is a strength 5 armor piercing.
I think so.
So you just gonna, if somebody moves within 12 of this,
and you're only 3 artillery dice, so that's potentially 36 shots.
30 shots, I think. 10 each, right?
Oh, is that the highest?
Oh no,
I thought it went up to 12.
Is it 3d6? No, it goes to 10. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10
30,
misfire. Yeah, this thing
can be devastating. Obviously, you can also roll only 2s,
and
then it does nothing, or it can blow up on the first turn.
Yeah.
But I think even the psychological effect on an opponent who knows what it can do is really powerful. And again,
if they don't know, they're going to find out real quick.
And in terms of putting your opponent in a bad position where they have to deal with your detachments and state troops on your terms, this is another unit that can help do that.
Yeah. And then going into the other rare choice, Flagellants. Phenomenal.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Unbreakable, or I guess
Toughness
crazed.
4.
Tough 4.
Yeah, the fact that it is the separate crazed thing and not just unbreakable is interesting.
It's
because it's a combo of a couple sort of things, because they're unbreakable, but then they also have to pursue.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not frenzy because they don't have to charge. So it's a weird combo.
It's this weird rule. They're a weird set of stats. They're really unlike anything else in the book by far. They're weapon skill 2, which is bad, but they have flails, so they're strength 5 in the first turn. So these guys nuke. Initiative 3 is fine. 2 attacks base though, and if you're bringing the Prophet, which you should, maybe, maybe not. If the Prophet has 3, they have the perfect combo of that you can take them in a small unit. Good thing these are 0-1, by the way, because if you could take as many as you want, I guess they are rare, but they're really good, I think. They can win combat if you go in a big unit. You can take them small though and just be a speed bump.
Yeah.
And in 6, there's so few attacks going around from most units that even a unit of 10
will last at least 2 turns.
It's going to take 2 rounds of combat, and they're tough 4, so it might be 3. You know, and if it's a big unit, you take 16 of them or whatever. It could take 2 to 3 turns for a unit to get through these guys, and while you're doing that, you might be mauling the rest of their force potentially.
And that's where, again, you can use them to hold up a key unit that your enemy would have wanted to have in their battle line when they ran into your main battle line, but now you can be holding them out. So I think, very helpful. And I think that rounds out how flexible this army book is, because there's at least one unit to do almost anything you could possibly want.
Right.
There's them as a tar pit. There's the fast cav with the pistoliers. There's the strong elite infantry with the great swords. There's the really good shooting with the artillery and handgunners. There's the hard-hitting heavy cavalry. This army list literally has everything you could possibly want.
Right.
And you can build it in so many different ways.
Sure.
But also are rewarded for taking a little of everything and really learning that mixed play style.
Right. I mean, I just want to echo everything you just said without saying it all again. But it's just, this is really kind of the capstone. I guess, do you want to say anything about the steam tank? We've not used the steam tank.
We haven't. I have one painted up, so we need to use it, but we haven't used it yet.
I've read the rules before we did this, and my comments are that it's incredibly fiddly.
Yes, it is fiddly. I think it would be kind of annoying to play with the steam points and everything, but...
Yeah, I think it's cool. I would like to try it.
Definitely.
And it's a gorgeous model, even the old one. And I think it's cool. It almost looks both overpowered and underpowered at the same time.
I think it's just swingy. I mean, it's like a lot of the Empire artillery. It's just if it works, it really works, but if it doesn't work, it just does nothing.
It looks like certain things will, as I guess you would expect, really struggle to do anything to it, but then if you just get like charged by Croxagores, like it's just going to get mauled.
Which is an amazing thing to picture.
Yes.
Croxagore just banging on this tin can.
Well, it's like, strength 7, it's like it loses so many hull points potentially. But really cool. I would love to try it. I would be curious though, because in 7th Ed, they really, I'm going to be honest, I don't love 7th Corps and a lot of the Army. Well, you know what? I like 7th Corps. I don't love a lot of the Army books, but Empire's pretty good. And they cleaned it up. I would almost say, if you want to bring it, try it,
Yeah, might as well.
But if you want to keep bringing it, if you're an Empire player and you're like, hey guys, can I bring it? Maybe look at the 7th Ed version. They made it work in the stat block.
Okay, so it's less bespoke.
It's less weird. You don't have to remember 2 pages of rules. Now, there's still a lot there, but it looks a lot easier to manage and just have your opponent actually know what the heck's going on. Because with the current one, you could be like...
That's also true.
It doesn't even use wounds. It's got like hull points and all this weird stuff. But just wanted to bring it up there because that was added pretty early on in the 6th lifespan. I think that came out in annual 2012, so early in White Dwarf. But, okay, let's go over a few of the standout items for us.
One last thing I want to say quick. Okay. At the back of this book, they have some of the alternative army lists, which are really cool. One of which is the Sigmarite army, which makes Flagellant's core. So your biggest nightmare could come true.
So what I just said.
That being said, they are limited by you have to have at least 1 unit of free companies per unit of flagellants. So you can't go totally flagellants with
What
that.
army is that?
Sigmarite army.
The Sigmarite army.
Yeah. Which, again, is so characterful, this idea that, like, all this rabble has been rounded up by a warrior priest who's leading them into battle just because they're like, the world's going to end, everybody's going to die, the beastmen are coming. But that would be incredibly powerful, obviously. And some of the army books, like the Lizardmen book in the back says, these supplementary lists are fully balanced and you don't need your opponent's permission.
Yeah.
All of these don't say that. They say these are just wild, fun narrative lists.
Crazy
You definitely
stuff.
need your opponent's
I feel like
permission.
this would have matchups where it gets absolutely mauled and have matchups where it is absolutely going to maul. So
yeah. I think it would be fun to try sometime, but I don't know if I want to paint that many flagellants.
There are some cool ones in there as Crusader, like all knights and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anyways, magic items.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just, and to preface this discussion, these are ones that I think are cool, not because they're
necessarily the best.
Yeah, best or the most competitive. I'm not bringing up the armor meteoric iron because 1-up armor saves are really good.
Obviously, that's great.
And I just a lot of armies have a item that does the exact same thing. So I'm trying to bring up stuff that seems somewhat unique. My first one, which is probably the most boring of them, is the Holy Relic. But the reason I bring it up, it's 45 points for a 4-up ward, is a lot of armies don't have access to a 4-up ward.
Yeah, which I think is great with Empire being low toughness.
Right, and there's a cool little lore blurb that it's the icon of Sigmar, often held by the Archlector of Nuln or whatever. So it's like maybe you gave it to a priest or whatever. It was handed down from that Archlector. It got brought out of a case for this battle.
Yeah, but that also hints that there's maybe more than one.
Right.
It's not just this bespoke item that there's only one of.
For sure.
Which
So
I
like that it could be any holy relic. Maybe it's of Sigmar. Maybe it's of Ulrich. Or whatever.
So you can theme it to your army. It could be a cool little modeling opportunity to actually put it on your guy.
And good. A 4-up ward is really good. 45 points is a lot, but you can fit it on a hero if you want. And I mean, as we've kind of discussed with the character section already, it's really easy to get good armor saves in this force for many characters. So if you really want to build a tank, I mean, throw a Holy Relic on there. Your guy might never die.
Yeah.
So you want to popcorn it? Do you have one?
Yeah, I'll go to a similar one. The Icon of Magnus, I think, is cool because it's really thematic. This idea of it being connected to the Emperor Magnus.
Sure.
But I think it's really good against certain armies. Obviously, undead, because it makes you immune to fear. And so in an army that could, especially when you start getting outnumbered by those giant skeleton or zombie units, not being auto-broken by that is huge. I mean, putting it on, especially something like knights, so because they're in smaller units to begin with anyways, could be really helpful. So I think that's a cool one. Again, something you could model even if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. I think in an army where there is no fear, except for, I guess, the terror from the Griffin, but you're not going to see that very often, and I guess maybe the steam tank causes terror. But outside of those weird standouts that you don't seem to see a lot in 6th edition especially, this has definitely got some value in a lot of matchups. So I think it's really cool and fluffy. From there, I'll go into, that was an enchanted item. I'll pick I think it's a... Is it also enchanted? Yes, it is. The Ring of Volans.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I love this one. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk on it. It's not nearly as useful in an open list environment. We've kind of played a lot of our games open list, but I think as we played more, we do more closed list stuff. And this is, I think, a banger in closed lists. To summarize it, it's basically you roll a spell at the start of the game like normal for the ring, but it just casts it. It's a one-time only use, but you could roll like a level 6 spell theoretically and get a free cast at power level 12 or whatever. And if you just pull that out
at the end of the magic phase when they don't have any dispel dice left,
and you could just completely do crazy stuff. And you could go for something safe like fire. And maybe get Wall of Fire randomly. But worst case, you just take Fireball.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool stuff there from a gameplay perspective, and the lore behind it too is that it's the founders of the college of the Magic College's ring. So it's like you could pick from any of the lores, and I just love that. And I think it's really, really neat, I guess, and just cool and powerful, but not like OP either.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't feel like a devastating surprise when your opponent pulls it out.
Right.
Yeah, well, that leads into my next one, which is Van Horstmann Speculum, which again only works with closed lists because it swaps your stats with the guy you're fighting. And normally,
we brought this in non-closed list stuff, and usually it's just like a shield.
Right, it just becomes a deterrent where they just won't challenge your wizard then, because obviously it's really good on wizards who have crap stats, and then all of a sudden they have Chaos Lord stats.
Right.
Super cool. I remember reading a battle report in White Dwarf when I was a kid where they did the scenario where it's just 7 heroes against an entire army. I don't know if you've looked at that scenario in the book.
I think I've read it,
Yeah, and so it was an Empire army, and I think it was leading up to the Storm of Chaos campaign, so it had like young Vultan and then some warrior priests and stuff, and so they were going against this Chaos army, and one of them pulls out Van Horstmann Speculum at one point, and when I was a kid, I'm like, whoa, that's amazing! He just like pulls this out and like turns back on them, and he becomes this Chaos Lord that he's going to just take this guy out. So I think it's just super narratively rich of an idea. I think it's really great for an army that has weaker heroes in general.
Right.
But yeah, it's only going to work if you have a closed list because I don't think it's worth the points just as a deterrent, because usually you're just trying to avoid getting your wizard into combat in the first place. So yeah.
Okay, and then from there, I'm going to go, and we're doing closed list here. You mentioned earlier you wished you had an item that you could make it so you don't fail a check. It exists. It's called Rod of Command. It's not super great. I don't think it's 50 points and it's 1 use.
Right.
Which is the thing. But I actually think it's pretty cool for kind of what we were talking about earlier. You could throw this on a captain maybe and guarantee you pass a break check.
Which there have been plenty of moments where there's been one linchpin break test that has ruined everything for the rest of the game. So, that having that, if I pass that one test,
it's expensive and it's a thing, and it's a reactive item, so it's going to be like something you hope you never need, right? Because if you're winning the game, I never took a break check, right? But this could be something that on a pivotal unit could just like save the game. Like, oh God, I got charged by those Bretonnian knights and I lost combat by 6, so I'm going to fail. Well, no, I pass, and now they're not on the charge.
Which is huge, again, because now you have your static combat res, you're going to get some hits in,
they're going to
have
be
the extra strength
3 or whatever, or 4, depending what they are, so it's just a lot easier to deal with. So it could be huge, and I just like that. I don't see a lot of spells, or rather items like this in any other book that I've seen.
Yeah, it feels very much like it's made for the Empire. It makes sense for the Empire.
It is expensive, but 50 means you can give it to a hero.
Yeah, and I think the fact that heroes in general are just so cheap, it doesn't end up feeling as bad spending more on those magic items.
For sure, yeah. I could see this getting used. It's expensive and maybe not the most competitive thing, but I can see it being used and being good.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I already mentioned the wizard staff. I think that just because of how cheap it is pretty good. It's 15 points.
Which one? The wizard staff? Oh, yes.
It's only 15 points, but it means that if you only have the one level 2 wizard, then you're getting to roll 4 dice on one spell.
You just
and I think that's totally worth 15 points.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll just say quick, I think there's some annoying things in this book, like I'm going to say the Rod of Power, but also the Laurels of Victory, because there are identical nearly items in other books, specifically the Lizardmen Army book, because I was looking at that are like half the cost and just do better. So for example, read me what Laurels of Victory does.
Each wound caused by a model wearing the Laurels of Victory, but not those caused by his mount, will count as 2 wounds when working out combat.
So it counts as 2 wounds. It doesn't actually do 2 wounds.
Right.
The Piranha Blade in the Lizardmen book just actually does 2 wounds and is cheaper.
Right.
So that's just like, why? Why does this suck so much?
I guess the difference would be is that's a magic weapon, so you're not going to get your hand. I mean, this is 70 points, which is a ton.
I think Piranha Blade is 35.
Yeah, this is pretty overcosted. Potentially very powerful. I could see the only time I think you're going to use this is in a high points game, and you're going to put that on a Templar Grandmaster.
Yeah,
But
again, my whole point with that is just it sucks when there's something that feels like another book does the same thing better for cheaper. I think Rod of Power, not Command, but Rod of Power is the same thing. The Lizardmen have Diadem of Power.
3 dice. Yeah, I don't know.
But this one doesn't even always work. So this is like maybe you get them.
Dice,
so you might just lose the dice and not have been able to cast them or dispel with them. But Diadem of Power, it's only 2 dice, but you guarantee that you keep them.
Right.
And it's cheaper.
Yeah, I think even the vampires have something similar, but that's cheaper still, but it's 1 die or something. There's a few things that do that.
Yeah. So anyways, just had to complain about a couple things, but that's probably the case with every army list. I'm sure every army has some items that are just garbage.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to that when we get through them. But there's definitely some. This was, I think, along with the orcs probably, right? Because they're in the starter set, the first books that came out for 6th. And you definitely see towards the end, some of them, I think they figured it out a little bit better. But they did pretty good in 6th overall. Final 2 items I just wanted to touch on. We kind of talked about Griffin Banner already, so I won't say a lot, but this is your standout banner.
Absolutely.
It is incredibly good. Getting up to a +6 rank bonus is
so good.
No one else can do that.
3 free kills. Yeah.
It is just super good. Super good. You can put it on, if you got an elector count, put it on a big block of swordsmen. You can put it on a big block of spearmen, and then the spearman's an issue. Maybe not as big of an issue, but an issue.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, the opponent needs to keep track of it and be aware because it's potentially devastating. Worth noting, though, it is your rank bonus. So if you're flank charged and disrupted,
and you lose it, which has happened to me,
does nothing.
Hurts.
And it is expensive.
Yeah.
And you never pursue. That's something that
I always
forget. So you always hold, which I think is totally worth it 90% of the time. So you'll never chase anybody down, but you're not losing.
So you're not going to put it
combat.
on knights, but knights don't have a rank bonus anyways.
Right. So just really good in a lot of situations. And then finally, I actually, just for lore, but also I don't think it's as bad as it looks. The Rune Fang, 100 points is a lot.
It is really good, but it is expensive.
It is. So it's your entire elector count magic points allowance. I said that very slowly. But all hits wound, no armor saves allowed. So you got 3 attacks because you're elector count. That stinks. Your weapon skill 5. So against any sort of heavy cav or whatever, you're going to absolutely maul them because you're probably hopefully hitting on 3s, and you're just, anytime you hit, they die.
Right.
But what makes this particularly, I think, usable is the fact that you have access to good defense in this army outside of the magic phase, or magic items. You don't have to take, a holy relic. You can just put plate armor on and a shield.
True.
You can
so
put them on a
spend
horse.
The points on this.
Right. You could just have a barded warhorse and plate armor, and now you have a two up. So you can get really good armor outside of the magic items list and still afford this. And it's just, this is the item. There's 12 of them, I think, made. And if you bring this narratively, this is like a big deal. They're taking this out of the vault. They don't bring this out all the time. And frankly, this makes a character who I would say is not particularly scary in combat scary to pretty much every character, because you could just roll 3 hits and kill a lord.
Right, absolutely.
So it's kind of scary to deal with. Maybe not worth it 100% of the time, I would say. Probably not, actually.
But again, in a closed list where you get the charge off and you go into the
and
Chaos Lord and you declare a challenge, and he's like, sure.
Of course I'll accept. And then you
maybe kill him.
And then you roll 3 4-ups, which I've seen happen.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then he just did you have an award save? You don't see a lot of ward saves. You don't. You see a lot of one-up armors.
Yeah.
And this just says that doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So
I would love to see it happen. I think generally I'm just so scared of spending too much on magic
It is a lot
items.
of points. So probably big games only. But I think there's a place for it. And there's a lot of big expensive weapons that I don't think are worth it much ever.
Yeah.
This is one of them that I think is.
It's good enough that it probably would return its points.
It does things for this character, the elector count, because that's all who can take it. He's only strength 4, but this is basically saying ignore strength. I just got to hit him,
right?
And then all armor's negated, and you are wounded automatically. So just skipping a whole roll.
Yeah, and honestly, even just getting an extra 2 to 3 combat resolution from that is huge too.
Yeah, so just, I think reasonably okay. Maybe some people are rolling over in their grave and going, no, that's never worth it. And you know what? You're probably right, competitively speaking, but I out of a 100-point weapon pool, I think it's okay. And I think that'll kind of finish it up. Do you have any overall thoughts before we maybe look at art?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, Empire is definitely one of the coolest looking armies when it's on the table, and it's iconic for me, and I really want my army to feel like these stoic heroes marching into battle, capable of defeating these horrendous foes as they're defending their homeland.
Sure.
But most of the time, for me, they end up just feeling like the Empire at the beginning of Mark of Chaos. I don't know if you played that game or have seen the opening cinematic, but they look awesome, super cinematic, but then they just get slaughtered immediately.
Yes.
And that's what it ends up feeling like so much, that they're like fighting this losing battle. And that can be cinematic. Obviously, the opening cinematic to that game is awesome and looks really cool, but when it feels like every game you play is that, it can get old.
For sure.
That is kind of lore accurate. I mean, we looked at some of the Chaos Warrior art in the main rule book in the other episode, and they're just totally wrecking those Empire
they're
guys.
Shanking.
Yeah, and there's
humans.
a lot of art of the Empire just getting wrecked by stuff.
And I think that's kind of to establish that these are a threat, because these are trained soldiers. So these are guys who are theoretically, this is their job, and they're just getting massacred.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's
how scary they are. Yeah. And that absolutely makes sense in the lore. But then it starts making you think, well, then how have they even survived this long? Like, why is the Empire still here?
Indeed.
And I think that just comes back full circle to what we talked about at the beginning, is they're just not an easy army to play.
Yeah.
It really does require a high level of competence to be able to use those mixed unit tactics. There's no one unit in this army that's going to win the game for you.
Yeah.
There's no one way to just like run in there and take everybody out.
There's nothing that you just spam and win.
Yeah.
Like I think like maybe the most cost-effective unit is the swordsman, but if you just bring nothing but swordsmen, you're probably
won't win.
You're going to lose. So you got to work around the strengths and pick your fights.
Yeah, and so that I say all that to my experience with them is obviously limited, and I still have a lot of room to grow as a player in competence.
Sure.
And so I think that eventually this army becomes something that does stand up to all of those big, mean beasts, and they can win. And I think that's why they still exist in the old world, because they have that type of training that's exemplified by the detachment rule and everything.
Right.
I just think it takes a lot more work to get there than it does for some other armies.
I agree. I think they're, if you could grade them on a scale, I think they're high difficulty level. I think they're kind of like some of the elf armies when we get to them, where it's just you really got to pick your fights. Yeah. You got to control the game.
Yes.
I'm going to keep saying that a lot. It's about enforcing your will on the opponent through your shooting and through your artillery and potentially through your magic, depending on your build. And that's assuming a kind of a standard, Empire army with a lot of infantry. If you're going all cav, take everything I just said probably with a grain of salt. But if you're going infantry heavy, it's about, weakening their units, picking out what are the big threats, forcing them into hopefully bad situations through good movement. And a lot of that sort of thing. So it's definitely an army that's going to reward experience, reward knowing your opponent's list as well as your own.
Yeah, so you know what you need to interrupt, what you need to disrupt.
Being like, oh, what's that unit over there? If you don't know what witch elves are, and you get surprised when your opponent charges them into your unit, you're probably not going to be doing super well with Empire. But if you know what witch elves are, and then you shoot them mercilessly, if they were deployed poorly or whatever, you're probably going to do a lot better in that game.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think one of the most rewarding armies once you figure out how to use it, and I think it forces you to get good at the actual game because there's no easy button. And so I think it's been really helpful for me to have as my starting army to really force me to think more about a lot of the core mechanics of how this game works.
Right.
But yeah, I still think I am still learning, still trying to get better at that and get to that level of control and competence. So wouldn't recommend it to a new player as much as it kind of feels like it should be a new player army. But definitely would recommend it to anybody who wants to really engage and get into the nitty-gritty of how the game works and get better at it.
I agree. Okay. Any art stand out from you in the book?
So much of it, but the one I picked is on page 17 with the flagellants. And
I picked the exact same one.
Nice, yeah.
I love flagellants.
It's this scene of a warrior priest walking with this grim face on, and he's got a big hammer, just like you'd expect him. It's got the flagellants just, flailing themselves, looking all kind of crazy.
It's got that repent into his forehead.
Yeah, so it's got that grim, that dark, that really this time in Warhammer started becoming more of a thing. And I also just love the pieces of art that depict something outside of battle, that give you this sense of the broader world. These guys are on their way to some battle, but they're not there yet.
Right.
So yeah, really just iconic for me.
I'll just pull up, because I did write down 2. 17 was the one that I fell in love with the most. Also, I want to say the cover art on all the books.
Oh, yeah.
It was... I didn't pick the cover art because I'm like, that's cheating. But I love the picture of the 6th Ed Empire Army book with the knight and the Templar Grand Master with the hammer.
Coming through the water.
And you see in the mist the city in the background and just all these spears and pikes and lances.
So
I just
good.
love it. But I also put down, this is kind of the opposite of what you were saying, but 65 is just a giant fight between what looks like, again, you got that battle priest with a hammer there in the center.
And the undead.
And then all these halberdiers and just skeletons, and I see some dire wolves in there, I think, as well, and just that foggy haziness that stretches into the background where you just kind of see outlines.
And that wizard in the background is toasting some skeletons.
Yeah, there's there's a lot of good stuff
here. See the silhouettes of the knights as it just fades off into the haze.
Yeah, I love this. This is Warhammer. That's what I see when I see the halberdiers fight the skeletons.
Yep.
Like, that's what I'm seeing in my mind's eye, and I think this is probably one too where it's like, I mean, obviously we're in the Empire book, but this is them laying the smackdown for once. Absolutely. Which is cool.
Yeah, it looks like they might come out on top here.
Yeah. So those were big thoughts. A lot we said. I think we planned to not say this much, but
well, there you go. This is our thoughts on the Empire Army book.
Empire.
Yeah. I think in the future we'll plan to do an episode where we put a list together, maybe to fight against the Lizardmen, which we're also going to be doing an episode on.
Yep.
So you can stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's our thoughts on the Empire for right now.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.